Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Pound and I am back with another video from chapter 1.2 about cells. Our topic today is going to be section 122 on cell structure. So our objectives for today are to state the characteristics common to all cells, observe and describe the differences between plant and animal cells, and identify the major parts of a cell and explain the function of each. So characteristics all cells have in common. The first is that they're mostly water, as organisms are mostly water. Um, the reason for this is they are complex systems that carry out many chemical reactions. And when you think of chemical reactions mostly happen in water. So living organisms and cells must mostly be water. Cells are really like test tubes, except in a test tube, we usually have one chemical reaction going on. There are many chemical reactions going on in the cell. They also have structures that provide protection and support, repair cell parts, store and release energy, transport materials, get rid of waste, and reproduce. And we're going to take a look at all of those cell parts. Now, the cell membrane is a flexible, thin, protective layer around a cell that helps control what goes in and out of the cell. And if we look in this picture in the background, if you can see my arrow, right here along the edge of that green, that is the cell membrane, and it is the barrier between the cell and its environment. So here, this is a picture from your book. This is the cell membrane on the outside here, and it's labeled membrane. There's also the cytoplasm. This is a watery fluid that surrounds everything inside of the cell. Now, I want you to make a special note here in your notes that the cytoplasm is not an organelle. We're going to talk about something called an organelle. It is not an organelle, so make that special note. And this watery stuff in here, there might be some organelles in there that we're going to talk about, but that is mostly cytoplasm in this plant cell. So here, the stuff that surrounds everything, that's this cytoplasm. Now, an organelle that I mentioned, this is a structure inside the cell that performs a particular function for the cell. And there are many of these organelles. Remember, the cytoplasm is not an organelle, so now you understand that a little better. The first organelle I want to talk about is the nucleus. This stores all the cell's information and controls its functions. Sometimes we call it the control center or the brain. And the nucleus is not found in bacteria. So right here in the center of this cell, and they tend to be in the center, although not always, is the cell nucleus. So this is the nucleus here in the center of this drawing of a cell. Now, just outside of the nucleus is the nuclear membrane, and this lets material into and out of the nucleus. So right here, the nuclear membrane, and you can see little holes in it to show that it allows things in and out. Now, also in the nucleus are the chromosomes. These are found in the nucleus and contains genetic information and directs cell growth. We're going to talk about the chromosomes later, but these things that look like X's, now they don't always look like this, but there are special times when they do. These are the chromosomes and they contain the genetic material. There's also the mitochondria. This produces energy for the cell. We often call this the powerhouse. This is a mitochondria right here. They tend to look a lot like kidney beans, and this is actually looking at the inside. There is this membrane that goes back and forth. That is where cellular respiration takes place, that provides the energy for the cell. And so here, this is a mitochondrion right here. Okay, mitochondria is plural for mitochondrion. Then there's the endoplasmic reticulum. This is the cell's transportation system. All these folds here outside, especially of the nucleus, they look like little tubes and tunnels and stuff. That is the endoplasmic reticulum. So right here, these folds, that is endoplasmic reticulum. A lot of times we abbreviate that as ER because that's a pretty long word. Then there are ribosomes. These produce proteins for the cell. They're like little factories. Proteins, remember, do so many things that we need lots of proteins. There aren't any shown in this cell. But if we go over here, there are these little dots. They're very small. They also sometimes are on the endoplasmic reticulum. And when they're on the endoplasmic reticulum, we call that rough endoplasmic reticulum. And the endoplasmic reticulum's job a lot of time is to transport proteins, because if they were left to just be out in the cell, some proteins are enzymes and things like that that could digest the cell, they would cause problems in the cell. So there's this transportation system to move them around in. There's also the Golgi apparatus, which modifies and transports proteins and lipids. That is this yellow structure here in this cell. Over here, the Golgi apparatus is here. The endoplasmic reticulum tends to be closer to the nucleus and the Golgi apparatus closer to the cell membrane. Now, remember I said things like enzymes that could damage the cell? Well, sometimes they're not completely activated and made over here. They're modified by the Golgi apparatus. So, like I said, that they won't break down the cell or anything. So there have to be changes made to them before they can become active and do what they're supposed to so that they don't cause problems in the cell. There's also the lysosomes. These break down food particles and old cell parts, and they're more common in animal cells. So right here is a lysosome. Just looks like a sac that contains some digestive enzymes to break things down. Now, there's also a vacuole, which stores water, food, and materials that cells need. Switching over to a plant cell, because they're bigger in plant cells. So here is a vacuole storing water. The vacuoles are actually really important because they do have water, especially for plants. They provide what's called turgor pressure, that presses against the cell wall and holds the plant up. If you see a plant that's wilted, it's because there's not enough water in the vacuoles, and so it looks wilted, and there's not enough turgor pressure. You'll also notice that most of the organelles we've already talked about are in the plant cell, except there are few organelles that only plants have. So let's talk about those ones now. One of them is the cell wall. This gives plants support and strength. So these kind of colorless structures in between the green, those are the cell walls. And the cell wall, it's like bricks piled on top of each other, just trillions of them stacked on top of each other. That's what even holds a tree up. These tiny little bricks, they provide a lot of support and strength. And so here is the cell wall just outside of the cell membrane in the plant cell. So cell membrane is the light green, the cell wall is the darker green. And then there are the chloroplasts. These capture sunlight to make cells food. These here are chloroplasts because they're green, and they're green because they contain the pigment chlorophyll. And inside of the chloroplast is where photosynthesis takes place to make the cells food. And so right here are the chloroplast. And you're looking inside, there are these plates that look like they're stacked. That is where photosynthesis takes place. So our objectives today were to state characteristics common to all cells, observe and describe the differences between plant and animal cells, identify the major parts of a cell, and explain the function of each. So don't forget your 5 questions in your margin for this video, and also continue watching the video and answer the questions at the end.